What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back today to talk about the 50th anniversary of one of the funniest movies that I've ever seen, Blazing Saddles, directed by the legendary Mel Brooks. The movie was released all the way back on February 7th, 1974, and from a personal taste, I think it can trade body blows with any comedy from any era, from any country that you care to mention. And obviously, if you're a comedy fan, if you love comedy movies, everybody's got their own personal Hall of Fame of classic comedies, like the movies that they quote with their friends and that sort of thing.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
But whether you're talking about Airplane or Trading Places or Duck Soup or Some Like It Hot, I mean, the list goes on and on and on of all the comedies that I like. But Mel Brooks, he's one of the rare directors where he's got multiple movies in my Hall of Fame. I mean, he's got many movies that I love. But for me, his three best are the original producers from the late 60s, obviously Blazing Saddles, and then Young Frankenstein. And what's crazy is how in 1974, Mel Brooks in February released Blazing Saddles, and then in December released Young Frankenstein. And it's like a 1-2 punch or a comedy double feature by a single filmmaker in a single year. I don't know if that achievement's ever been equaled, or I think it's an unmatched achievement in the history of comedy to release two all-time great comedies in the exact same fucking year, and they are movies that I can basically revisit and rewatch anytime.
Mongo only pawn in game of life.
And not only did Mel Brooks release two great comedies in the same year, they were both smash hits. Like, it's hard to put into words just how different the film culture was in the 70s versus now, but just to give you an idea of how much more popular movies used to be, with the budget of Blazing Saddles, the budget was $2.6 million, and over time, with all the reissues and all the re-releases theatrically, the movie has grossed theatrically $119.6 million, and almost all that comes from the domestic market. This is a movie made for the American sensibility, but name the last time a big budget movie from any studio grossed roughly 50 times the budget. But not only was Blazing Saddles a huge hit, Young Frankenstein, which was made for $2.78 million, also grossed $86.2 million. I mean, these are serious numbers. And so anytime I hear people who are considerably younger, who have never seen Blazing Saddles, are like, that movie's not funny. Like, my friends tell me that movie's offensive. I'm like, according to who? Like, if you look at just the receipts and the audience response, then clearly it's a beloved comedy. And that's one of the wonderful, beautiful things about the comedy genre, is that there's no bullshittery, there's no lying involved, because if you go to a comedy club or a comedy movie or watch a comedy show on TV with your friends, when something fucking funny happens, well, then people howl with laughter, and it's like, no matter what your political or intellectual or social pretensions might be, or whatever guardrails you have for like what you allow or don't allow in the world of pop culture, I feel like comedy, if it's good, quickly eradicates all boundaries.
Work. Hello, boys. Have a good night's rest. I missed you.
Just one more bill for you to sign, sir.
What the hell is this?
I guess when it comes to what is funny and what is not, I defer to the judgment of people who are actually funny, as opposed to those people who have never told a joke in their lives. Like, if a comedian says a movie or a show or a stand-up special is hilarious, well, then I'm much more inclined to listen. But in the case of Blazing Saddles, we have some true comedy giants involved, because not only do you have five amazing screenwriters, Andrew Bergman, who initially came up with the story, along with Richard Pryor, Alan Euger, Norman Steinberg, and Mel Brooks. Man, that's five screenwriters who are all just like, going insane, throwing the craziest shit imaginable into the movie.
Hey, boys! Look what I got here!
Hey, where are the white women at?
But you also have one of the greatest casts ever assembled for any comedy. You got Cleavon Little as Bart, got Gene Wilder, I mean, he's comedy royalty, Harvey Korman, Slim Pickens, Madeline Kahn, Mel Brooks in multiple roles. I mean, this is like a who's who or a murderer's row of some of the funniest motherfuckers who have ever lived, and they're all doing some of their best work at the same time in the same movie. And so this is just that rare situation where not only did lightning strike twice in the same place, it struck repeatedly in the same place throughout the entire production of this flick. And when I hear people talking about this movie and disregarding it, having never seen it, I just want to tell them, look, like, this movie, not only is it funny, it's got like 50 to 100 scenes where they're so fucking funny after 50 years that I still I'll choke with laughter when I hear them. I was just rewatching it today, and we got to that scene with Taggart and Hedley Lamar about how to run everybody out of Rock Ridge.
I know how we can run everybody out of Rock Ridge.
How?
We'll kill the firstborn male child in every household.
Too Jewish.
And there's just something about the way the actors are delivering these lines where they've got comedy kind of like just like a cancer in their bones. Like they can't help but be fucking hysterical. Like every atom in their body is designed to make people fucking laugh. And I've seen firsthand the power that this movie has to completely change the vibe of a room where like you might have a little negativity and it just lifts it right up. And forgive me for a second while I pause to tell you a quick inappropriate story from a misspent youth. But in college, a couple of friends of mine and I had this kind of harebrained scheme where we were going to drive to the western part of Virginia, visit some weird like mansion on a hill. We were going to take LSD, and as we came down, I guess as a way of like kind of sobering up, we were going to go to a hotel room, plug in a VCR, watch a few movies on video, and then drive back to school. And that was our responsible way that we're going about it. So we had a blast out in the woods, laughing, screaming, going crazy. And I had arranged a double feature for the hotel room experience. The first movie of which was The Hobbit from the 1970s, the Rankin and Bass classic animated film. But it was so weird and so otherworldly and so dark. I could tell like the mood in the room was like getting darker and darker, and they were getting paranoid, and like they were just having a really bad reaction to the flick. And about halfway through, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should try Plan B. So I popped out The Hobbit, popped in Blazing Saddles, and the moment that goddamn theme song started with like the cracking whip and everything, like everybody kind of sat up and they're all kind of bobbing their heads and watching the movie. And I was like, wow, like Mel Brooks. And this would have been 1996 or 1997. This was already an old movie. I might be old as dirt, but I was not born when this movie came out. But yeah, everyone that I know that loves this movie, they discovered it after the fact. And I discovered this movie at a pretty young age due to my older brother. And anybody out there who's a younger brother can relate to the idea that your older brother's kind of an abusive tyrant that you're afraid of. However, you also look up to them in ways where like their taste in books or music or movies, whatever, it all has a huge influence. Like whatever they find to be cool, you kind of look forward to the day where you can like equally cool stuff. And one night he was watching TV and I was in another room doing God knows what. And I just kept hearing him like cackling and laughing and screaming. And I walked in, and at that time, like age 12, age 13, the idea of watching a movie that was older than I was, particularly a Western, I mean, I wasn't there yet. I didn't really get into Westerns until a few years later. And I didn't get into old movies until like age 19. So the idea of watching Blazing Saddles was just ridiculous. However, I sat down for a few scenes, and I almost felt like we were going to get in trouble for watching it. And I left the room, and I came back later on. I saw a few more scenes, and then finally I watched it in its entirety. And I don't know how many times I've seen it throughout my life. I mean, 50 times, 100 times? I have no idea. I've seen it an epic fuck ton in terms of total viewing experiences. And each time, I mean, if anything now at age 47, I think the movie's funnier than ever because I appreciate it for what it is, for what the various contributions were by the writers as well as the performers involved. It's just such a rare, wonderful, beautiful, unique movie-going experience.
Here's your badge.
Badges? We don't need no stinking badges. Oh, no.
And just to make sure that this unique viewing experience is always available to me, I have my Blu-ray for this fucker right here because I live in constant terror and dread that people in their early 20s who do not like movies from the 20th century at all, or don't even particularly like movies, but who work for these giant studios and these giant tech companies, that somebody who's like 22 years old in their infinite wisdom will decide to censor the movie or pull it from circulation in spite of the fact that it is a beloved classic. But it's like, yeah, censor it, remove it, do whatever you want. I will continue to watch it, and if you remove it from circulation, then yeah, I'll probably have to rip it off the Blu-ray and post it illegally somewhere just to continue sharing the glories of Blazing Saddles until the end of time. But I feel like if you're worried about your favorite movies from the early 70s being censored, against your will, that is the biggest argument that I can make for physical media. Like, nobody can take away a movie from you, or nobody can change a movie against your will if you own it. Like French Connection. French Connection recently got censored by Disney, and it just makes my vision go fucking red. And so luckily, I do have the French Connection intact on Blu-ray. So all the censors and all the sensitivity readers and all the buzzkills and douchebags out there who like to censor other people's art that was created a long time ago, well, all y'all can go fuck yourselves, because I'm gonna watch what I feel like watching. And I guess maybe now's as good a time as any to dive into the controversy of the dreaded N-word, the N-bomb, which apparently is only used about 13 times in this movie. But when you watch it, it seems like it's like 150. It's like watching like Scarface and trying to remove the word fuck. And this is not a word that I feel compelled to use in my own private daily life. Like, I don't come home and put on hip hop and like lean into the word while singing along or anything like that. There are plenty of people out there who do that. Like, they will act ashamed in public, but they will say it in private. It never even occurs to me to use it. However, in the hands of master comedians and kind of all-time great funny men, people like Richard Pryor, well, then I'm going to pull up my chair and I'm going to listen and I'm going to laugh. And, like, I'm never going to tell people when, where, and how they should enjoy the word or not enjoy the word or use the word or not enjoy the word. All I'll say is that in the context of Blazing Saddles, I have absolutely no problem with the word, but it should be said that Mel Brooks, he did face some headwinds and some resistance at Warner Brothers in the 70s. Because when it came to the writing of the movie and the filming of the movie, Mel Brooks kept deferring to Richard Pryor as a writer and to Cleavon Little as the star. And it's like, is this okay? Is this funny? Is this not funny? And every time Richard Pryor, who was kind of a bad boy back then, he would double down and triple down. And Richard Pryor almost played Bart himself. However, in 1974, Richard Pryor was still a bit of a wild man, bit of a hellion. And they would just tell these crazy stories about how, like, he would go home and meet some crazy girls, and suddenly he would wake up in Detroit, or he'd wake up in Cleveland with no idea how he got there, but he would need $400 in order to get back to New York to keep working on the script and things like that. Like, he was just, Richard Pryor was on the way to becoming a superstar, but was just, he was a wild man. So Warner Brothers did not want to use him as the star. But I feel like Cleavon Little, because he's got that stage background, he actually does bring a lot of kind of heroic gravitas to the role. And actually, in a weird way, Cleavon Little's so goddamn funny, but he also invests the movie with some emotion that might not have been there otherwise if Richard Pryor to play the role. Like, if you look at the movie and kind of strip away all the comedy, what remains is this wonderful, beautiful movie about friendship. It's actually an incredibly enduring movie about the power of friendship between Gene Wilder and Cleavon Little. And I lovingly refer to these movies as like Ebony and Ivory movies. And obviously Stevie Wonder had the song Ebony and Ivory, I think like in the early 80s or late 70s. But whether you're talking about movies like Lethal Weapon or any of these movies that kind of pair a black guy and a white guy to team up to save the day. I mean, maybe it's dismissive to refer to them as Ebony and Ivory movies, but you know what I'm talking about. It's a great formula that works over and over and over again. So once again, Blazing Saddles, in the absence of jokes, it would still be probably a pretty enjoyable Western starring Cleavon Little and Gene Wilder. But getting back to Warner Brothers and their objections to the movie, I think it's really easy for film historians to say, oh, film culture sucks now, but once upon a time, everything was great. Everything was perfect. Like, if I could just go back to 1931, I could see all the great pre-code gangster movies and comedies that I could ever want. Or if I could just go back to the early 70s, I could watch all the kick-ass kind of deconstructionist Westerns and gangster movies and character-driven dramas created by the new Hollywood that I could ever want. Like, what a wonderful time to be alive. But the only reason it was a wonderful time to be alive is because filmmakers were fighting these battles. And according to Mel Brooks, some of the main objections by Warner Brothers, they didn't like the constant use of the N-bomb. They did not like the scene with Lily von Stupp seducing Bart in the dark. No, it's true. It's true. I mean, it's one of my favorite scenes of the movie.
Is it true what they say about the way you people are gifted? Oh, it's true. It's true. It's true. It's true.
They didn't like the fart scene at the campfire because up until 1974, for whatever reason, there hadn't been a lot of farts in movies, especially in Westerns. They're sitting around drinking hot coffee and eating beans all the time, and yet nobody farts for some reason. But anyway, Mel Brooks said he put all the farts from all the previous Westerns all into his movie to make up for lost time. But also, Warner Brothers, like, they didn't like things like Mongo punching out the horse, and it should be said, Richard Pryor basically wrote every line of dialogue for Mongo. That was kind of his bread and butter.
Never mind that shit. Here comes Mungo. Continue.
But Mel Brooks had the last laugh because he did have final cut on the movie, and the only change that he was willing to make, maybe because he just thought the line wasn't as funny as it could have been, but in the it's true, like Lily's seduction scene, there was a line where he says, I hate to disappoint you, man, but you're sucking on my arm. And so that was removed, and maybe the scene would have been funnier with it. Maybe it's funnier without. I don't know. I've never been able to do the compare and contrast. But Cleavon Little and Madeline Kahn, they made some serious magic together. But getting back to the dreaded N-word, Mel Brooks' attitude was, if you take it out of the flick, you basically don't have a movie. The whole point of the movie is to make people confront racism and confront societal injustices and that sort of thing, but while making people laugh and howl every step of the way. Like, if you take one of the scenes between Hedley Lamar and the governor, played by Mel Brooks, when he's talking about how he's he's cooked up some bill to basically like steal 200,000 acres of land from the local indigenous people, and he's like, oh, like they're such children.
Well, under the provisions of this bill, we would snatch 200,000 acres of Indian territory, which we have deemed unsafe for their use at this time. They're such children.
200,000 acres.
I mean, this is the kind of material that I would suspect that the people who would argue in favor of censoring the movie would also appreciate that kind of humor. Once again, I feel like people who are censors, whether they're censors of music or books or paintings or movies or video games, they tend to censor things sight unseen because they don't appreciate the lines or the situation in their appropriate context. But according to the myths, according to the legends, there was a famous screening on the Warner Brothers lot where all the executives and producers were invited. And they weren't really laughing. They weren't really enjoying it. And they thought they had a huge bomb in their hands. And Warner Brothers was even considering not releasing the movie and just taking a huge loss on it. But then Mel Brooks set up a subsequent screening for the studio employees. Like, whether you're pushing a broom or whatever the case might be, but you were invited to the screening. And when regular people showed up, they were laughing uproariously throughout the movie. So once again, I just feel like comedy is such a wonderful, honest response and reaction to something that you see on the screen. And then the end, fucking Barack Obama likes this movie. I feel like, no matter what complaints people have, I feel like the last laugh will always be had by Blazing Saddles. But let's get into some of the granular detail as to why this movie is so goddamn good. Because I think first and foremost, Mel Brooks is wise enough to surround himself with some really good people, whether it's the person singing the theme song or a great DP who helped him figure out how to shoot a Western in that kind of great CinemaScope aspect ratio and that sort of thing, or writers like Richard Pryor. When it comes to stand-up comedy, there are a lot of comedians who have really blown my mind over the years, but I think Richard Pryor, he's on his own wavelength, that he's just willing to explore certain topics from a certain point of view that no other comedian has ever just been that ballsy. Basically, he was capable of just murdering a complete crowd of people with laughter, with some of the shit that he was cooking up back in the early 70s. And when Mel Brooks asked Richard Pryor what he thought about Cleavon Little playing the character of Bart instead of Pryor himself, apparently Pryor responded, "I could be Cuban, but there's no mistaking Cleavon. He'd scare the shit out of those rednecks." And that, I think, is the perfect response, because when you see Cleavon Little riding up to Rock Ridge and, that famous bit, like, the sheriff is near and so on and so forth.
Hey, the sheriff is near.
What are you saying? The sheriff is near.
That scene only works if you have an actor who is incredibly dark in their overall complexion. Like, you gotta lean into just the outrageousness of this incredibly hostile, racist community, slowly but surely learning to accept and love Cleavon Little's character. And once again, it's like you strip away the comedy, there actually are some wonderful, beautiful, heartfelt moments kind of littered throughout the movie, but you're so busy laughing, you don't even really notice just how emotionally impactful the movie can be. And what's so great about Mel Brooks' approach, where you basically have a bunch of like city guys writing this Western satire or satirical parody or whatever the hell you want to call it, but you basically have a lot of New York Jews from the Bronx and from Brooklyn who have their own point of view. But they were smart enough to realize, we need to actually have like some real cowboys in here. So they would bring in people like Slim Pickens, who actually had like a real authentic accent and that sort of thing.
How about some more beans, Mr. Taggart? I'd say you've had enough.
If you look at him in like Dr. Strangelove, or you look at him in movies like The Getaway. He was working with Kubrick. He was working with Peckinpah. He was working with major fucking directors. He was in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, one of my all-time favorite Westerns. And so when you bring in an actor who has that cowboy authenticity, but also can do comedy, what you find is just pure comedy gold. But I'm just going to go through all the major cast members and their character names and just give a few shout-outs to all my favorite scenes. And then I'm going to wrap this up, because I don't want this just to turn into a 90-minute video where I just quote the movie over and over and over again. So Cleavon Little, where are the white women at? Jesus fucking Christ. I don't want to confuse my nostalgia for an era that I never experienced with, and also my frustration for the comedy moment in which we find ourselves, because so few good comedies are being made. I don't want to overpraise it just because it's so good in comparison to the crap that we get now, but Can you imagine what would happen if a movie these days had a scene like Where the White Woman At, or The Sheriff is Near, or any of these, or Lily von Stupp asking him if he wants another Schnitzengruben? And I've been guilty throughout my life of thinking that quoting comedies aggressively somehow is a substitute for wit, intelligence, or originality, and it's not. However, every once in a while, I've been guilty of whipping out some quotes from this movie, and how people respond tells me a lot about whether or not I want to continue spending time with them. Like, if you're enjoying the physical act of love with somebody and they ask you, when will I see you again? And you say, well, it all depends upon how much vitamin E I can get my hands on. If they howl with laughter, marry that person on the spot. If they give you a strange, bewildered expression, well, then they probably don't enjoy outrageous comedies. And what's interesting now looking back is seeing just how many movie references are scattered throughout the flick that it totally bewildered me, but it didn't matter. I still laughed. Like the scene where it says, you do it for Randolph Scott. I'm like, oh, Randolph Scott.
You do it for Randolph Scott.
Randolph Scott.
All right, Sheriff. 24 hours.
I mean, that shit is pure movie gold. I didn't see a movie with Randolph Scott until I think I was 21. I finally saw Ride Lonesome, this great Bud Bedecker Western. I was like, holy shit, I get it now. Randolph Scott, he is a bad motherfucker. Movies like Tall T. But in the late 80s, I had no idea who the fuck Randolph Scott was. But somehow the scene still works, even though I had no idea what the hell they were talking about. But yeah, the references to old Westerns are just littered throughout this, because Mel Brooks, he said not only did he see basically every single Western that came out throughout the 30s, 40s, and 50s, he always assumes that the audience is hip or with it or up to speed. He never talks down to his audience. He never assumes that they're stupid. He never assumes that they have bad taste. He assumes that most of the people that are showing up, they're more or less, fans of the same kind of shit that he's into. And I feel like that's the best approach. Make movies for yourself and make movies where you would want to invite people to share in the experience. And people who don't get the joke, well then fuck them. But Cleavon Little's performance would be greatly diminished if he did not have Gene Wilder as his dance partner. And Gene Wilder wasn't originally even cast as Waco Kid. The original actor, what the hell is his name? Anyway, he was going through the DTs. He was a horrible drunk. And that scene where he's hanging upside down in his jail cell, apparently all this green goo started coming out of him. They realized, oh, he's still physically unwell. And then Gene Wilder stepped in and played the role. I think he'd been originally offered the role played by Harvey Korman. And he thought he wasn't right for the part. And obviously Harvey Korman was born to play the part of Hedley Lamar. But the Waco Kid, I mean, everything he does just makes me fucking scream. Like when they're talking about, like when like the chess scene where when Bart tries to grab the chess piece, or later on when he shoots the guns out of everybody's hands, he's like, well, don't just sit there holding your hands in pain. How about a round of applause for the Waco Kid? And the way Gene Wilder puts his hands out and gets the high fives all around, just so satisfying, so cool. But obviously, Gene Wilder kind of been playing second fiddle to Zero Mostel and the producers. It was cool seeing him kind of be like the co-star in this, and obviously he would be the lead in Young Frankenstein, where it's probably still the finest comedic performance of his career. But I'm going to say something which might be a little controversial. My two favorite comedic performances in this movie are not those by Cleavon Little and Gene Wilder. It's actually the two performances by Harvey Korman and Madeline Kahn. And Mel Brooks said something incredibly kind. I almost said tired because of the fucking song she sings. Mel Brooks said something incredibly kind, not tired, about Madeline Kahn, where he said, she's one of the best things that God ever made. And that's just a very broad, sweeping statement. But her gifts as a comedian, her gifts as a performer, her gifts as a singer were just prodigious. He talked about how only a really good singer can deliberately sing poorly and make it convincing, because obviously Lily von Stupp is based on Marlene Dietrich's performances in movies like Destry Rides Again or Rancho Notorious. I mean, I love Marlene Dietrich, but she was guilty occasionally of being just a little off with a note. Like, as Mel Brooks says, she might be like a third under or a third over. It's just, she didn't quite have the ear to hit all the notes perfectly. But Madeline Kahn, like, as Mel Brooks said, she could hit the exact middle of every note if you asked her to. However, in the context of this song, where she's singing I'm Tired, the dirtiest song that Mel Brooks ever wrote, he wanted her to miss a few notes, and she would miss the notes exactly to the degree that he wanted her to. But goddamn, between this and Young Frankenstein, I mean, Madeline Kahn, she's brilliant in so many things. I first saw her in Clue, where she just absolutely floored me. But this is just a filthy performance, which is just so goddamn funny when she's talking about, like, tell me, sheriff, or is it true what they say about how you people are gifted? I mean, Jesus fucking Christ. This is the kind of material that so rarely gets mined and explored, but it makes me laugh and laugh hard.
How's it going?
It's like wet sauerkraut in my hands. By morning, he would be my slave.
Splendid. Just let me have a little feel.
Yeah.
But the same way Cleavon Little needed Gene Wilder as his dance partner, Madeline Kahn needs Harvey Korman as her dance partner. And she's like, oh, by morning he'll be wet sauerkraut in my hands. I mean, I got to stop quoting the movie because I'm not nearly as talented as the fine performers in this. So yeah, it sounds good to me. I'm sure it sounds miserable to everybody else. But Harvey Korman as Hedley Lamar, once again, I didn't know who Hedy Lamar was at this time, so I didn't understand the confusion between Hedy versus Hedley. And there's that joke about, oh, this is 1874. Like, you could sue her. Like, it's a 1974 style set in 1874. So in a lot of ways, this video is kind of the 150th anniversary release of the story of Blazing Saddles, but Hedy Lamar ended up suing them after the fact, like all those decades later. So apparently, she didn't get the joke.
It's not Hedy, it's Hedley Lamar.
The hell are you worried about? This is 1874. You'll be able to sue her.
But I feel like every great comedy director or comedy writer, they need a few actors around them that really understand their humor and really they're like right on that exact same wavelength. And I feel like Harvey Korman was that to Mel Brooks. And I love how he's like the most mature, most sophisticated person in the Wild West, surrounded by a bunch of shit kickers. Like when he says, my mind is a raging torrent flooded with rivulets of thought, cascading into a waterfall of creative alternatives. I mean, it's actually like an astonishingly good performance. It just happens to be an astonishingly good performance in the context of comedy. But I feel like if people did not look down their noses at comedy like a bunch of fucking snobs, Harvey Korman probably should have won Best Supporting Actor in 1975 when they were looking back on the year of 1974. But as good as Cleavon Little is, and as great as Gene Wilder is, as hilarious as Harvey Korman is, as great as Madeline Kahn is, or Slim Pickens, like, telling his buddies, somebody's got to go back and get a shitload of dimes. I mean, all these things make me howl.
Has anybody got a dime? I don't know, James. Somebody's got to go back and get a shitload of dimes.
None of this would matter if you didn't have the glue that brings them all together. Mel Brooks, who is serving as writer, director, and playing two prominent roles and one small role throughout this flick. And so in the end, this is the Mel Brooks show, and he hits the ground running with every scene, whether it's like an Indian chief who speaks Yiddish, or playing the governor saying things like, hello boys, have a good night's rest, I missed you. I mean, I'm doing it again, I'm quoting the fucking movie, I gotta stop quoting. But this is the way Mel Brooks described the creative process in writing the flick. He said, Blazing Saddles was more or less written in the middle of a drunken fistfight. There were 5 of us all yelling loudly for our ideas to be put into the movie. Not only was I the loudest, but luckily I also had the right as director to decide what was in or out. And that just sounds like so much goddamn fun as they kind of nurtured this strange script that originally was called Tex X as a play on Malcolm X, but they were worried it was going to be mistaken as an X-rated movie, so then it became Black Bart. You can see a few references to Black Bart kind of hidden throughout the movie, but then apparently Mel Brooks was taking a shower one day, and suddenly just like he had this moment of clarity, or like a revelation came to him, and he just realized, Blazing Saddles, and obviously it's one of the greatest titles in the history of movies. And pretty much every time this movie has a major anniversary, they make yet another documentary celebrating its success over the years. And if you look at the Blu-ray, it's got, I think, one 45th anniversary video and one 40th, or maybe it's a 40th and a 50th. Anyway, there are a couple different documentaries on it. But when asked about why this movie really just took off like a fucking rocket, why was it so successful, and why does it remain successful? Why do people keep coming back to it? Why do people keep laughing? And he thinks it's just because of its honesty, because if you tried to depict, the heavies or the bad guys in the movie, many of whom felt horribly conflicted about the dialogue that they were handed, and they kept asking for permission to say the things that they were being required to say. But if you didn't depict those guys in an honest fashion, well, then it wouldn't have worked. But it also is depicting them honestly, but without being heavy-handed. It doesn't feel... It's weird as how the movie is message-driven, but this is how you do a message-driven movie without people realizing what's happening to them. Like, they have a little teaspoon of sugar to help the medicine go down, because this is a movie about racism. This is a movie about land snatches.
Of course, land snatching. Sea, land, sea, snatch.
This is a movie about all sorts of horrible things, but you're howling every step of the way, and so you don't mind internalizing the message because you're having such a good fucking time. And if you compare that to a lot of contemporary movies, present-day movies, they have the problem where it's all message. They're dogmatic, and they're incredibly heavy-handed, and they're just like in your face, like, this is the message, like, fucking shut up and take it. And it's like, all right, well, fuck you. I don't care if your message is James Hancock is a incredibly charismatic, handsome individual. If you're force-feeding it to me, I'm going to, shove it back in your face. But Mel Brooks and Richard Pryor and all these actors, they all understood. Make people fucking howl, and they will basically accept whatever shit you want to give to them if they're having a great time every step of the way. But with that, I'm going to bring this video to a close. But if folks enjoyed it, 2024 is still a relatively young year, but there are a lot of cool movies that will be experiencing their 50th anniversary throughout the year. So if people like this and want to see more, then yeah, look at the calendar, see what's coming up, and I will gladly do so. This just came together last minute. Earlier today, I was thinking, God, I don't have any new movies to review until Thursday. What video can I make right now? And so I just happened to check what are the 50th anniversaries. I was like, oh my God, Blazing Saddles, it's one of my all-time favorite movies, and the anniversary is tomorrow. And so I worried for a second, shit, haven't done any prep, I'm not ready. But I've been honestly preparing to do this video my entire goddamn life because I've been watching this movie off and on for 35 years. So hope y'all enjoyed it. And if so, there'll definitely be more videos like it in the not so distant future. But if you enjoyed it, please consider hitting that notification bell, subscribing, become a member, liking the video, all that good stuff. You know the drill. But I hope everybody has a good time celebrating the 50th anniversary of Blazing Saddles. Rewatch the movie and show it to a friend who's never seen it before. And keep the love for this flick going for a few more decades. But thanks again for watching, and I really appreciate it. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.